Scaling the circular economy across our existing industries will require we develop comprehensive policy frameworks because voluntary commitments by industry leaders alone won't help us reach the scale we need. How can policy enable circular economy business models to become the norm rather than the exception? Well, in this episode of the Circular Economy Show, we will address this question in the context of Europe and looking specifically at the fashion and textiles industries. Want to find out more? Let's get started. Welcome to the Circular Economy Show by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, where we develop and promote the idea of a circular economy, engage key actors in the system to make it happen, and mobilize solutions at scale. My name is Laura Franco. I am part of the team here at the Foundation, and I will be your host for this episode. Today, we will take a closer look at policy as a key enabler of circular economy business models. We will focus on Europe, and we have a great lineup of external guests who will be helping us find out everything about the policy world, how it works, and how it is key in setting the direction for businesses and innovation towards the circular economy. But before I introduce my guests today, let me remind you at home that this is only a true conversation if you take part, and we want your comments and questions. So please, wherever you are watching us from, post those in the chat, and the team behind the cameras will pass them on to me. So who are we going to be speaking today with? We have Lars Mortensen, the circular economy expert at the European Environment Agency, Paola Migliorini, the Deputy Head of Unit on Sustainable Production, Products and Consumption at the European Commission, and we also have Rebecca Ugla, who is the Senior Advisor at the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency. But before I speak to them, I have invited someone that knows a lot more about circular economy business models than me. I have my colleague online, Marilyn Martinez, the project manager at the Make Fashion Circular, who is going to help us understand everything about what these circular economy business models are all about. Welcome, Marilyn, and thank you so much for being today with us in the Circular Economy Show. I would like to kick off...
Hi, Laura. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me. Yeah, it's great to be here, and I'm excited to hear what our guests have to say about this topic.
Thank you, Marilyn. And I think to kick off the conversation, we should tell the audience a little bit more about what we mean when we use these words, circular economy business models.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the key question, right? Before we start talking about it. So circular business models, how we understand it at the Foundation, how we speak about them, are any strategies that really allow businesses and the businesses can implement to create more revenue without making more products. So this decoupling of making revenue from the extraction of raw materials, of extracting and producing more products, is key when we talk about circular business models. In fashion, I guess, because this is a fashion and textile conversation. So in fashion, this typically means that the circular business models that we see usually are making money by increasing the amount of times clothing are being worn. And the most common examples that we're seeing on the market today are re-commerce and rental circular business models, which in a sense, they start making more revenue and creating more revenue streams by rotating existing products through different users.
So in a way, the way you put it was decoupling revenues from extracting more raw materials, so from making more products as gas. So we want to keep products and materials in use as long as possible. And as you said, you have taken a closer look at the fashion industry. So what is happening there? Have we seen an increase of these circular economy business models lately? And what is driving that?
Yeah, great question. I think it's actually an exciting time, I think, for circular business models in the fashion industry. If we only look 3 years back, that's like 2019, what we've seen is a massive increase in startups looking into ways that the fashion industry can resell clothes, for example, or rent clothes. And that has skyrocketed in the last 3 years. And to prove that, I mean, you can see that today we have about in the industry, there are about 6 what they call it unicorns, which means that companies that are valued of over a billion that are I guess startups that were born by renting or reusing clothes in different ways. And some of these are, I mean, you might know some of these. They're called Vestiaire Collective, Vintage, ThreadUp, Poshmark, and a few others that I'm forgetting. So that's really exciting. And what is exciting about that is that because these startups have massively scaled in the last 3 years, then it has spurred a way of innovation, meaning that now really, I guess, big retailers and incumbent brands that are already established in the market are really, I guess, accelerated their efforts in trying to find new ways in which they can create revenue without making more products. So these startups have really, I guess, accelerated the pace in which companies are innovating throughout the industry. Another thing that we've seen, and that's, I mean, at no surprise, given that the last year we've been we've gone through different types of lockdowns all over the world. And I think that customers, so that's like people like us, have really changed their way of accessing fashion or reconsider the way in which they're accessing fashion. Loads of people have realized that they don't need that many clothes in their homes. I guess our lifestyle have changed a bit as well. And that means that they're more open than ever before in trying new ways of accessing fashion. So both of those combined together have meant that it's really an exciting time for circular business models in the fashion industry. We've seen it around in the news and so on.
It is great to hear something exciting like this, Marilyn, in these difficult times for everyone. And you've mentioned rental and resale. Are these the most common innovations that we are, or the most common circular economy business models that we are seeing, or is there more to it?
I mean, there's definitely more to it. I guess that's a short answer, but I mean, absolutely, rental and re-commerce are the most common one today. And all of the unicorns that I was mentioning before, that is companies that are valued at more than $1 billion US dollars on the market, are actually within the rental and re-commerce space. So those are definitely the most common. If there's more to it, there's definitely more to it. I mean, what we are starting to see is that there are also startups right now emerging that are starting to combine different strategies into their own core business model. And what that means is, for example, I know of one startup that has only sources secondhand used clothes and has implemented a rental subscription model with those secondhand clothes. So actually, you know, in one core business model, there are different ways in which she's implementing these circular business models into their strategy. Another one that is super exciting is that there are startups right now looking into, and even companies actually, that have decided to move away completely and start thinking beyond products. So how can you create more money and deliver fashion to customers without even having to make anything in the first place? So, for example, digital clothing and digital collections are now emerging, and that is like people, you know, a person like me, for example, goes into a website, you pay for a digital dress, you submit your picture, that dress gets fitted into you, and then you have that picture that you can use to post on your social media and use it as a, you know, I guess, social media content development. So it's a completely different way in which companies can create money, but at the same time, it's also not attached to products. So it's definitely a nice way moving forward and a very innovative way that I'm seeing in the market, I guess.
So Marilyn, for anyone that is not a fashion expert like me, this last example that you just mentioned, buying like a digital, let's say clothes, this would be useful for example, like companies that maybe sell or send a lot of clothes at the moment to influencers for like maybe posting about them or using them maybe for a single time. Is this correct, or what sort of impact are we talking about?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. So I think it addresses quite nicely this crave for newness that some people have. Like some people really crave just newness, and then they use a dress they post it on Instagram, and then because it's already on Instagram they don't want to use it again. So it addresses that quite nicely, and at the same time it provides a solution for companies, because companies right now, well, in terms of their marketing budgets and influencer social media budgets, what they do is they give for free loads of clothes for these influencers to post a picture on their social media platform, and then hope that it converts and it monetizes, right? However, like what this allows them is like they have more agency and control into which items specifically and how and which picture this person influencer can use. So for example, if I'm a company, I can say, okay, so I'm gonna give me your pictures, I can select 2 of them, then I'm gonna fit you a couple of my products in those pictures that I like, and I can tell you, okay, this is the picture that you're going to post. So you give them a lot more control into their I guess influencer marketing relationships, and while at the same time eliminating this need to create making clothes just for that single 1 use of Instagram, while having the same effect, because I mean, if it's nicely done and the influencer knows about this, obviously, and is willing to take a picture, like in the required like place and time and lighting and so on, then it just eases the process so much.
Thank you, Marilyn. And I have a final question for you, because we have explained what circular economy business models are about, and you've given us great examples of what they look like in practice. But how do we ensure that these circular economy business models become the norm? What needs to happen? Could you give us a quick overview?
Yes, so I think there are probably 4 key things that need to happen along the industry, starting for a mindset shift. And that's a mindset shift from seeing circular business models as an add-on or as something that stands separate from a company's core business to, in a sense, and essentially a core business opportunity. So that's the first thing. And I think that when people start having this mindset shift and really appreciate circular business models from the core business opportunity that they are, because they allow companies to increase in the revenue without having further environmental impact. So the promise is very compelling. Then it will start unlocking a couple of other things that we need, which is that we need the industry to start exploring the full suite of different business model strategies the circular business model strategies that are out there. So as I was mentioning, rental and re-commerce are the most common, but there's a plethora of ways in which companies can create more revenue without creating more products. So we need these companies and business leaders to really start, I guess, exploring deeply and in many different ways, and combining different strategies to really get these benefits of circular business models. And then while doing that, it is worth for them also to consider what are the best practices when implementing circular business models. So what are the key differences from reverse logistics compared to the traditional linear model logistics, and have those things right up front, so then we ensure that there are no unintended consequences when implementing and increasing the market share of the circular business models. And finally, and I guess most importantly for this session, is the need for collective action to really address and ease the uptake of circular business models throughout the fashion industry. And what I mean collective action is not just the fashion industry, but also the investor community, the media, and everyone around the fashion industry to act together and collaborate so that we can effectively start embedding new ways of accessing fashion within our mainstream culture.
So mindset change, reaching scale, sharing best practices, and collective action. Thank you so much, Marilyn, for being here with us today. And of course, collective action also means having policymakers on board, and we should move on to talk to some of these key actors who are influencing, designing, and creating the policy frameworks that will help businesses and innovations move towards the circular economy. So we're going to move now from the Isle of Wight in the UK to Denmark to speak to Lars Mortensen, the circular economy expert at the European Environment Agency. And in order to get the most out of Lars, I have invited my colleague Valerie Boiten, who is the Senior Policy Officer at the Institutions, Governments and Cities team at the Foundation, to talk to him. Welcome, Lars, and welcome, Valerie. And Valerie, over to you to kick off the conversation.
Thank you very much, Laura, and welcome, Lars, on the show. Great to have you here. Maybe can we start with some introductions, because I'm not sure all viewers are that familiar with the agency that you work for. So what is it that you do also in relation to the circular economy, and what's sort of the role and mandate of the European Environment Agency?
Good afternoon, it's really a pleasure to join the show. So the European Environment Agency, we are an EU institution, and our mandate is to monitor the environment in Europe. So we monitor the environment through data we collect, through indicators, and through preparing assessments. We do that for the environment, but we do specifically for priority areas, and circular economy is one of our priority areas. So we monitor the circular economy, we monitor it overall, but we also monitor it for specific systems like for textiles and for plastics and electronics.
Great, thanks. And then just to pick up on the topic today, I mean, you published a report on this earlier this year. The report was called A Framework for Enabling Circular Business Models in Europe. And in that report, you highlighted a few things that basically need to happen for these business models to become mainstream or to become the norm, as Laura was saying. One of these was all about innovation. Another one is all about policy. So maybe just on these fronts, what do you think that really needs to happen for the transition to emerge at scale?
Absolutely correct. We just published both a briefing and a report actually on a new framework to enable circular business models. And in that framework, what we do is that we identify the innovation which is needed in the companies and the enablers that are needed, the policy enablers and educational enablers. And what we identify is different types of innovation. When we talk about innovation, most people think of innovation is about technology. That is correct. There is technological innovation needed, for example, on textiles, new types of textiles, new ways of recycling, etc. But there's also social innovation needed, and a lot of people really are not so much aware of that. Social innovation is about new ways of working with people, new forms of interacting, the whole social media and all that. So the innovation is needed, but the innovation doesn't happen by itself, and that's what we are pointing to, because the policy actually needs to enable the innovation as well. So it's really important that the policymakers put the right policies, the right regulation in place to enable the scaling of the circular business models and not to hinder them happen.
Great, that sounds great, I'm sure, in theory. Now, what does it actually mean in practice? So, I mean, I guess we would love to hear from you some examples of policy measures that could actually, encourage innovation, that could enable circular business models. I mean, we ourselves, we tend to say that we need a mix of policy measures. So we need to work both upstream on design, making sure products are made to last, but we also need to build systems and incentives to make sure products are actually taken back, put back into circulation. And then through all of that, I suppose we're talking economics here, we have to address the economic framework. Do you have any concrete policy ideas or measures in mind that could address all of that? And sort of what impact do you think they might have?
We do actually. What we've done is that we've actually made a whole menu of policy options. We're not a policy-making institution, so it's up to the policymakers to decide which ones to use. And one what we point to, for example, is eco-design. So basically to have better eco-design measures in place, to put guidelines and regulation about how to design, for example, textiles so that they're better for the environment, so that the textiles last longer, so they can be easily repaired, for example. So that's one really important measure that could be much more fully implemented and put in place.
Great. Any other examples in terms of fixing the economics, making the economics work, which is the title of our episode today?
Well, making the economics work is really important for the circular economy. The circular economy is about making the economy circular, the production and the consumption in the economy. Of course, changing the economy is not easy. This is about using taxes, levies, removing the subsidies, which is not easy. And it's not easy for policymakers. Often policymakers hesitate to do so. But I think it's really important to move towards circular business models. You also need to get the prices right. You need to have prices actually reflect the environmental damage of the products that you produce. And one way to do this could perhaps be to agree on targets overall at EU level or at country level, and then leave it up to the country to say, okay, how can we best meet these targets? Because often research shows that the best way to meet the targets is through the use of taxes and levies. For example, you can change the VAT rates for certain things that are more circular. So that's one option.
Great, thanks. Yeah, you mentioned at EU level and country level. We will be hearing from both the EU, the Commission, and then also the Swedish level in a bit. So we'll be hearing some concrete examples, I suppose, of policy measures that are on policymakers' minds or even being tested at the moment. Now, maybe for you also a bit coming from your research background, I suppose, looking at what's currently on the policy agenda, is there anything that you think is missing, anything that we should be addressing in order to move forward?
Well, I think it's interesting in this whole area of circular business models and textiles that this is really new on the policy agenda. There's not a lot of regulation on it, and now we're looking forward to see what comes out of the Commission in terms of a strategy for sustainable textiles and how that should enable the circular business models. And I hope that this strategy will also address the circular business models, and I hope that national strategies will also address the circular business models, because what we've found is that the circular business models they're not implemented by themselves, they are not scaled by themselves without the right innovation in place. Of course, this is up to the companies, but the enablers in terms of policy, but also in terms of education, is really needed from the policymakers. So it's really important that the policymakers put the right framework in place that enable the scaling of these circular business models, both in terms of not having policies that are made for the old economy, but policies that are made for this new circular economy that makes it easier, but also in terms of perhaps providing financial contributions and support to many of these businesses who are really trying to scale the circular business models. I think that's important. I think it can be done, and I think it will be done, actually.
Thank you, Lars. No, great message in terms of they don't scale by themselves. We need to actively work towards that and put the right conditions and incentives in place. That's it from my side, but do stay with us because I think we have some questions from the audience. So over to you in the studio, Laura.
Thank you, Valerie. And yes, please, Lars, stay with us. We've had some activity on our platforms and I have received some questions. A lot of the audience is talking about the role of governments and also how customers can be engaged by this. And we have this question for you around what would you recommend, like based on the reports, on your report and I guess its findings, people are asking, what would you recommend for policy actors to get started? Are there any policies to set the stage?
Well, I think there are many policies. But one thing you can actually do first is actually to have a strategy, to have really a circular economy strategy, and to make sure that the circular business models is in that strategy. And putting one policy in place is not sufficient. So we're talking about, I mentioned the eco-design, I mentioned the economic measures, but there's also extended producer responsibility, which is really important. So actually to make the producers responsible for the products they produce, also after it's sold. At the moment, they're only responsible for the product until it's sold. That is not the responsibility anymore. If the producers were made responsible for the materials also after use, then they would have an incentive to produce things that last longer, produce things that can be repaired, and ensure that they can get back and recycle and reuse them again. So I think that would probably be my personal advice to do so. There's a lot to be done, but it can be done, I think.
Thank you, Lars. So there is no one silver bullet. We need to really have this comprehensive set of policies in place. Thank you so much for being here with us, Lars. And before we speak to our next guests, I would like to remind you that this is only one of the episodes of the Circular Economy Show. Every other week, we are joined by policymakers, educators, designers, and businesses to talk about solutions and about how to scale the circular economy. So I would like to share with you a very short clip that shows the topic of the discussion 2 weeks ago.
Circulytics is both a unique measurement tool and a significant source of insights for us. So it is a strong asset that will help us reach our 2025 targets and also our climate ambition commitment.
Well, so the fact that the score is simple, right? You get a grade like when you were in school, and that grade communicates, to you. You have an emotional reaction when you see it. Is that score good? Are you happy with it? Or is it not that great? And you need to find more energy and momentum to improve.
At the H&M Group, we have a vision to become fully circular, and we have a long-term target to become climate positive in our full value chain by 2040. And of course, to be able to reach those visions and goals on a more broader level, we need to measure progress and how we're getting there. So measurement is key. What gets measured gets done, right?
So there you go, every other Tuesday, new circular economy content out there for you. If you don't want to miss out, please click on the subscribe or the follow button, depending on where you are watching us today. And actually, while we were watching this short clip, I've been joined in the studio by Jos Bleriot, the executive lead at our institutions, governments, and cities team. Welcome, Jos, to this session. And Jos is going to be speaking to two of our guests today. One, Paola Migliorini, the deputy head of the unit Sustainable Production, Products and Consumption at the European Commission, and also Rebecca Ugla, who is the senior advisor at the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency. Thank you, Jos, for being here with us today, and over to you to kick off the conversation with Paola.
Always a pleasure, Laura, and I'm quite shocked that you're not a fashion expert, so a good job I'm here, right?
It doesn't look like it, though.
No, it doesn't. You do a good job of hiding it. Yes, it would be my pleasure to talk with Paola, live from Brussels, I expect, Paola?
Hello. Well, actually in Italy, but
you're in
speaking
Italy.
About fashion, I thought it was good to be in the right place.
Well, that's very good of you to keep us on our toes. It's really nice to have that conversation. We've been talking for a few years now around circular economy with your unit, your colleagues and yourself. And let's start maybe by bringing a bit of context. So we know the Circular Economy Action Plan that was adopted in last March was and still is a key pillar of the Green Deal. You threw me off a bit by disappearing like that. All right, steady now.
You never know what you can expect from the Commission.
Yeah, that's true. Very volatile situation. The focus clearly is on sustainable products, that notion that we need to close the loop, but also clean the loops and make sure we have the right products in the market. There's also a big focus at sectoral level on the textile sector. And maybe my first very simple question, why is that?
Yes, thank you very much. As a matter of fact, you said it. It's a long journey that we have started several years ago, and in fact, at European level, we have been trying to indicate more clearly where we wanted to go. Last year, I would say, with the European Green Deal, so the green growth strategy for this Commission, and a few months later, with the Circular Economy Action Plan #2, we identified a series of key value chains that really needed to go circular. They needed this policy enablers push, I could say, just to repeat what Lars has indicated. So why? It's certainly because we have identified it as an area with big potentials, untapped potentials, and also we have made it a political commitment. I think that one of the key successes of any major changes is really to have a big political momentum, and we have this now with the textiles. We also see that there are big opportunities for businesses, and allow me to link it also to the specific situation of COVID. So it's a question of opportunity at the same time, and see how we can address some of the difficulties of a sector that has been hit by pushing even more on the opportunities that moving to circular economy could provide. So it's really a mix, I would say, of measures of political commitment and economic opportunities to move towards greater circularities. In the background of all these reasons allow me really to highlight the environmental impacts of the sector. So, I mean, I also want to keep really in focus what it is, this major objective of greening the sectors. So looking at the impact and trying to promote more sustainable practices in the sector. So you have this series of elements and ingredients.
Yeah, and you mentioned the environmental impacts. We've seen the volumes of fast fashion and low value pieces of clothing grow massively over the past decade. At some point, people said textiles is going to be the new plastics. Is that also why the Commission was intent on acting specifically for that sector?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we saw how relatively quickly an issue could become an advantage, and then try to use and to see how the attentions of all the stakeholders, being the producers or the consumers, was somehow attracted by a material, plastics. So we thought, well, clearly, if we manage also, when we want to make a big change, we managed to pull all the strings and then to join all the actors together in order to make a change. This is probably what we need, and this is what's going to make the difference. You also see, to compare with plastics, some common issues. Again, the environmental impacts and some measures, I would say. So some of the answers that we can provide. From a public perspective, I would see, a lot of work on green public procurement would be beneficial for both, because the topic of today is also specifically on business models. Clearly, new business models are important enablers in both areas. But I've also heard people saying that absolutely not, textile is not the new plastic. So this is something that I wanted to explore. We wanted to explore a little bit better with the stakeholders. And in fact, there are some peculiarities, as you can imagine. But I think in the end, what we want to achieve is to gather the momentum, not only for presenting and developing a policy response, but also to continue and then transforming the sector overall. So not just a policy momentum. This is, I think it's very important from our side.
Yeah, and let me take you up on that notion of the business models, because I think we need to have that proper conversation and not just mention business models. What concrete measures do you foresee could be taken in order to push those business models that essentially aim at retaining the value that's already in the economy?
So with this communication or strategy or strategic framework that we're going to come up with in the course of the year, we are going to focus on, at least on design and on the waste aspects. So when you think about design, you need to look through the angles that we see. So looking at requirements and incentives. For business models, we really think that we need to do more on incentives. At the same time, some of the requirements that will come out, and I see how complex it can be for the participants to follow, but some of the requirements that will come out with different measures on sustainable products, for example, that we're going also to adopt, will allow to have the enabler in place for the most appropriate business models. I'm thinking about, for example, reparability, requirements for recycled content to a certain extent, requirements for durability, the type of material. So all these elements will be hopefully part of specific requirements that will enable then businesses to understand and to turn into practice and into new business models the measures that we will have designed in the course of the years. So it's a combination of requirements and incentives. So also maybe supporting. You see, just something that I always find as engaging with some stakeholders. We say that the circular economy makes business sense. And then we are asked about what are the incentives that you're putting in place. Incentives I'm talking about, for example, funds. So I always try to strike the balance, because I think it's important to have innovation funds through research programs, for example, in place to kickstart, to support, to cover for the risk part, maybe at the beginning, and to kickstart this revolution, let's say. But then, in the end, the business models that will take place, hopefully, will function as an example, and so then really they will change also the habits of the consumer. So the whole system will kick in, hopefully not too late. Huh?
Yeah, and very, very briefly to wrap it up, there's a strong tradition of quality in textiles in Europe as a manufacturing base. You're not going to say the opposite being in Italy right now. How do you want to rekindle that and make it a stronger relocalized argument as well? Is it about engaging the sector and strengthening that sector within the boundaries of the union?
I think that clearly, because of the reality of the sector, we need to devise a policy that has international aspects. So not only for the European model, clearly. I think that we are engaging also with international partners because of that. We want to strengthen the competitiveness of the European businesses. And when you talk about materials, for example, so we want to ensure that we ensure the quality of the material. I'm thinking about professional textiles, so the quality of the materials. So then secondary raw material markets are developed, but at the same time, we don't have to compromise on the quality, for example, on some health and safety features that some quality material allows. So again, the same balance between trying to push for specific materials, trying to address specific countries or specific areas for the problems or for the opportunities that they have on circular economy.
Well, thanks very much, Paola, and we'll keep in tune and wait for the latest development from the Commission. Laura, over to you.
Thank you, and it's been great to see the conversations happening on our chats. We've seen a lot of people wanting to know more about the question that you asked, Paola, about what concrete actions can enable new circular economy business models to take action, and maybe also just to finalize with you, Paola, to elaborate a little bit on one of the things you mentioned. Where do you see the greatest potential for the industry to play an impactful role in the transition? So in terms of businesses?
I think that the best contribution that businesses can do would be on the design. And certainly, if you allow me, if we're talking about businesses from the fashion world, I think that would be in engaging consumers. And in fact, we want to team up as much as possible with the fashion world to draw with us also the consumers, because let's face it, the circular economy is going to happen if all the partners, all the actors play their role. So we can talk about design and business model for ages, but if we don't engage the consumers also in this journey, we will not get there. So I think there's a plethora of roles and then of areas, unfortunately or fortunately, where we can actually act.
Thank you so much, Paola. And I think it's time to talk to our final guest, Jos.
Absolutely, and I think that was a really good transition, actually, because we're going to take a national angle and see how some of the policies that have been put in place play out on the market. Hello, Rebecca. So we're losing a few virtual degrees moving from Italy to, I presume you're in Stockholm? Or in Sweden, yes. At least? Yes, good. I got that one right. Jumping in straight, can you tell us a bit about the policies that to date have been implemented in Sweden around textiles and the fashion industry?
Yeah, well, we work with the whole value chain, and it means that we've been working a lot in Sweden. So to start with, we have a reduced tax on a VAT reduction on repair from 25 till 12% on the repair of textiles. But this one has, though, not been evaluated yet. So, and it seems to be more difficult to evaluate than we thought from the very start when we started to ask about this. So unfortunately, we have to wait a bit more for information about this. We also have a total VAT relief for non-profitable organizations working with secondhand. But other commercial secondhand operators have the ordinary VAT on 25%. Sweden has also had an EPR scheme proposal on consultation, and now the answers have to be compiled and evaluated. And the purpose of introducing an EPR for textiles is twofold. So the first one is to achieve environmental benefit through the increased collection of textiles for reuse and textile waste for recycling, primarily then for preparation for reuse and recycling. The other one is to place responsibility for waste management and recycling on textiles on the producer based on the polluter pays principles. Now, the proposal says that the Swedish EPA should estimate how much textile waste is thrown away in the residual waste and in the energy recovery fraction at recycling centers at 2022. And the long-term target for this average is to be reduced by 90%. And this will be done in 3 stages related to 2022. So in 2036, the average is to have a total decrease by 90%. Now, think about what to do with the material that's been collected. The target for handling the collected material is that at least 90% of the textile waste collected by the collection system is to be prepared for reuse or be sent for recycling.
Yes.
Now we've also.
No, sorry. Carry on. I thought you were,
we
were done.
Okay, so another thing that we've been working with is an effort to inform consumers about a more sustainable consumption of textiles, and also to stimulate more sustainable business models within textile and fashion. So we've just had a 3-year governmental assignment to inform consumers about more sustainable consumption of textiles. And we've done this for example, through an Instagram account called Textile Smart. We got 21 million crowns for the assignment, and they could also be used for the development of more sustainable business models. So we decided to put 3 million crowns into a project called Retextile. They've been working with plenty of actors to develop new concepts and collections beneficial for the environment as well as for economic reasons. And Retextile, they also started a project called Fact Movement, where 10 influencers were recruited, and they agreed not to buy anything new for 6 months while getting education, inspiration, and challenges. And these influencers then spread their insights on social media, inspiring consumers with more sustainable consumption of textiles, and also revealing new values to the industry that they could capture while developing their business models. We, as the Swedish EPA, thought that this was a very interesting way to inform consumers and to inspire others. So we decided to make a financial contribution to start up a new round of Fact Movement, though having it scaled up into a national Fact Movement. So 63 new influencers spread all over Sweden were recruited. And we also established a communicative cooperation between Textile Smart and Fact Movement.
That's a really interesting point, because it seems like a lot of it hinges on talking to the public and trying to get the opinion on board, and it's an interesting way of looking at it. What has been the reaction so far, and where do you foresee policy developments based on those learnings? What do you think you can really push forward aggressively without getting everybody up in arms?
I think that the responses has been very positive. We've only had a positive response for Textile Smart and our cooperation with Fact Movement. When we've been working with our communication campaign, it's been very important for us to include the stakeholders and companies as well. This has been one of our tracks because they meet the consumers more oftenly than we at the Swedish EPA do. Our main learnings and challenges and outcomes from our work with this is, well, we know that Sweden has a high consumption of newly produced textiles. I mean, we consume almost 14 kilos of textiles per person a year, and the availability of new clothes is high, and household expenditure and the purchase of textiles have decreased over the last 20 years, while the amount of textiles purchased have increased by almost 30%. So we know that recycling isn't the solution when it comes to Sweden. Instead, we need to focus on wearing the products already in place more than what we actually do today. Based on our work, we know that everybody has to contribute to development, and we need to work with the whole value chain. And the transition to circular economy must be conducted jointly by politicians, the business sector, the public sector, academia, private individuals, and society. The solutions to the problem, they cannot be solved by one single group. So everybody has to contribute, and we think that it's important to work, for example, both to stimulate the supply as well as the demand for more sustainable products and services. These changes have to go hand in hand.
Yeah, it's really important, because then you're going to have to circulate the value, but put the right things on the market in the first place. Laura, I think we have a lot of questions coming in from the chat, but interestingly, Rebecca preempted most of them.
Yeah, exactly. Rebecca, a lot of questions during this session have been about engaging with the customers and the users. So a lot of this has been really well explained by you. Thank you so much. And thank you, Josh, as well, for co-hosting this session with me today. Fortunately, that is all we have time for today. Finally, thank you for watching this episode online. Just as a reminder, we broadcast every other Tuesday at the same time, 3 p.m. UK time, on all our channels. And if you want to check out what is happening in a couple of weeks, please go to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation website. The best way to stay up to date is to subscribe to our YouTube channel or to our LinkedIn or Facebook channels to be notified every time we go live. And if you want to really know everything that is happening in the circular economy world, sign up to our newsletter to find out more. If you have really enjoyed this conversation, please click on the like button and share it with your network. And finally, thank you again for watching this session with us and for being on this journey. And we look forward to speaking with you in 2 weeks at the Circular Economy Show.